Hi everyone, welcome back to Property Partners Podcast, and this episode is all about property investing. And this episode is about smart investing and successful landlording, what every investor needs to know. And today we're happy to have Ervina Deng back with us. Ervina is the head of growth at Harcourts, property specialist, and she has a lot of experience, 17 years experience in property market, both in overseas and also in Australia. And not forgetting, she's also an award-winning business development manager in WA. She helps her customers, property owners, both from WA and also from global investors to manage their properties here. Really delighted to have you back, Ervina.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be back.
Very excited to dive into this episode with you, Ervina. So let's start with the big picture, all right? How do we start with becoming a property investor? Tell us a little bit.
I think my answer would be back to the basic questions, which is, why, where, when, what, and how. Why? Why people why do you want to invest? What is your short-term goal? What is your long-term goal? That's the why. And then where? Where do you want to invest? Locally? Globally? What suburb? What interstate? That's the second question. And also when? Is it a good time to buy? Is the market actually on your side? What are you going to buy? Apartment or house or even commercial? And the last thing, which is the most important thing, how are you going to do that? How are you going to achieve your goal? Are you going to buy cash, or you have cash, or you're going to engage a finance broker to get a loan from the bank? And how are you going to structure it? Are you going to do it under personal name or under a company or even under family trust?
Whenever I talk to someone who is investing for the first time, we don't just look at how much you can borrow immediately. We look at what is their short-term and long-term goal. And we always ask them, have you spoken to your property manager on where to buy? Have you actually talked to your accountant about the structure, the right structure to invest? Whether it's still good to invest in your personal name to take advantage of the negative gearing, or your next level investment, you invest in your family trust. So in Australia, we can invest in different structures. That's amazing. And also some structures are actually tax efficient. And Josh, what is your experience in that?
It's not about luck. People just do it, willy-nilly, right? So it's always about having the good strategy, as you mentioned, Ervina, and also having the right team on your side always, isn't it? What are some of the top tips for someone first time buying, and what should they consider when they actually get into the market?
Do a lot of research the market. Is it actually a good time to buy? Is it actually not a good time to buy, or you better to wait until the market on your side to start? And then do a lot of research with the location as well, with the suburb that you're going to buy. For example, how much is the rental yield? How much is the rent? And do we have a lot of demands from tenants' demands to rent in that area? And what are the infrastructures that are happening? What are the developing side, from developing side? Because that will affect your capital gain as well. And then lastly, obviously, research the cost involved. How much budget do you have? And then how much do you have to put capital? And then cost involved like council, the water rates, and also strata. Strata cost is something that a lot of property investors forget to consider when they purchase apartment. They forget to include that cost, the strata levy.
From a lending perspective, actually, when we assess whether the property customer is going to invest is viable, we take into account what is the rental appraisal for that particular property per week. And for that, we rely a lot on property managers' advice on their research on whether certain property that they're interested can get certain yield. We also need to know the cost. The recent lending developments, we need to take into account how much is actually the cost of managing the property. That will actually factor in whether the yield of the property can actually help to fund the property. And Josh, what do you think? This is where our roles come together, isn't it? As a property manager, mortgage broker, and also buyer's agent, we work together really well, planning it for our investors.
That's exactly right. So obviously it always starts with you, isn't it? Where we get the finance, we want to make sure that, that they know what they're doing getting into the market. And then obviously that's where I come in. I go and source the property. We look at all the different things that you've mentioned, the location, the strategy, what is it that they want to go. And finally, we push them over to you, Ervina. That's where you come in, how do you manage it? How do you market this property and make it a very viable investment property? how a buyer's agent and a property manager actually works together. How do we work together, and how does that synergy benefit an investor?
When you get a client approach you and say like, hey Joyce, I would like to invest, I would like to buy this, and then the capital, like how much that investor willing to spend, that's probably a good idea to start talking to me. And I can give some insight from, okay, for this particular, maybe you can suggest a few suburbs, and then I can come from the rental point of view about the demand, about the rental yield, and also maybe some improvement that can be done to make sure that our clients get the best return from that investment.
Investors come to us for advice, isn't it? And I think I've also called you up a few times, isn't it, Ervina, to say, hey, Ervina, we're buying in this area. What would my rental be?
Yeah.
What could I do to improve on this property? And that's where that expertise come in. And that's why it's very important to work with local rental property managers in that area so that we can find the best deal for that client.
For mortgage broker, once the investor already spoken to property managers and buyer's agent and they're ready to make an offer, then I will come in and I will make sure that the loan is pre-approved. That will give massive confidence to the investor that they are pre-approved to buy a property with certain attributes. If you can buy this property at this market price and this rental yield, then the bank is happy to give you the loan. And before they even make an offer, what we'll do is we'll check the postcode. Postcode is really important because some banks are really over-concentrated in a certain postcode and they are withdrawing lending for properties in a particular suburb because they have too many customers there. But of course, in the market, we have more than 40 lenders who can actually provide some sort of lending options for the investors. So they don't necessarily have to be if they really like the suburb and the suburb has a lot of potential, it doesn't mean they can't get a loan. They just have to make sure they talk to the right professionals. And this leads to our next question, actually. We're building a team around the client and each of us understand the strength that we bring to the conversation with the client. And let's talk about yield and capital growth. This is important. I'm sure you get asked a lot. Should I focus on the rental yield, 10%, 9%, or should I focus on a lower yield but capital growth? Perhaps you can talk to us a little bit about that and how you manage that expectation from your clients.
Most of the time, it depends on the stage where they are investing. First-time investors normally they rely a lot on the cash flow, on the rental payment to pay the mortgage. On that stage, normally property investor will focus on the rental yield because they really depend on it. But later down the track, when they not really dependent on the rental yield, they can look into the capital growth as their land bank. They get a long-term gain. So it really depends on the stage where they are as an investor. The question is, again, what is their goal? Sometimes they just want to get short term and then sell it straight away, get a high rental yield or they just want to keep it like 20, 25 years.
That's right. Actually, we always look at the serviceability of the loan and also the property growth. Sometimes it can be neutral, sometimes slightly negative. And if it makes sense, a little bit of negative gearing is okay as long as there's capital growth potential.
That's right. I think it's not a one-size-fits-all. If I can add to that. We all want capital growth as well, but we forget that it's a long-term game, right?
Yes.
So it's about getting the right property, good location. We know that there's going to be capital growth in that area, and over time you're going to get your yields as well. What are the common mistakes that you see investors make? We see a lot of them, and I'm sure you've got some stories to tell.
A lot of them buying it with emotion without even doing a lot of research. They don't know about the market. They don't know about the area. They're just like, oh, you know what? I want to buy now. Or I want to buy this particular in this area without doing a lot of research, without even speaking to professionals like us, to finance broker, to buyer's agent, or even, property manager. I think that's the very common mistake that first-time investors do. They're just like buying it with emotion. Second one would be like not aware of the potential costs. I mentioned briefly before, they don't do a lot of research back again, and they don't know about the cost until they bought the property, and then there's, I didn't know that I have to pay a land tax, or I don't even know as a foreign investor I have to pay this, and I'm not even aware there's strata fee. I'm not even aware of management fee. That they don't put that in their calculation, so they miss that. The third common mistake would be overcapitalizing. They buy a property without even, and then they put a lot of capital there without even looking at the return. They're just like, overcapitalizing and not getting the return that they want. The other point would be like they don't engage a good property manager. That's when, that's when I come into place. A lot of them, they buy and then just do it themselves, and then they not really engage a professional to get maximum return. And also lastly, they don't mitigate their risks. They think about like the good thing, but they forget like you want to get return, there's always risk. They don't insure their property, like building insurance and also landlord insurance.
How often do you see my friend bought in this place or my family members buying in this place, so I would want to buy it here? How
Yes.
often do you see that? I hear that a lot.
Yes, I heard that a lot as well. They just like, or they just think, I've heard this one is good, but they forget that they don't do a lot of research. Yes, sometimes, for example, this suburb is good, but they forget what they buy. They buy a really, really rundown property and without even spare cash to renovate, and they don't get the return.
My friend bought here, and now they're saying, all right, now since they bought here, I also want to buy here, but they already missed the pick of it.
Yes. Yes.
So how often do you see people rushing into deals there, Diana?
Rushing into deals is so common in my world because a lot of times my customers bought a property and say, Diana, I need a loan. I just make an offer. I got an offer accepted and I need a loan tomorrow because my finance clause is expiring in 5 days.
It's the scariest thing, isn't
That's
it?
nightmare for mortgage brokers, but we get through it anyway. We usually get extension for the client and managing it with the seller's agent. Yeah, I actually have a question for you, Ervina. You mentioned about managing risk. Can you talk to us a little bit more about landlord insurance and why it is important to have landlord insurance as a property investor, especially in Australia where tenancy is heavily regulated?
Yes.
Tenants are protected.
Okay, so a lot of property investors think that landlord insurance is the same with building insurance. That's absolutely not right, because landlord insurance is basically cover anything to do with your tenancy. For example, stop paying rent, again, because Residential Tenancy Act, we have to breach, terminate, and then take tenants to court. It will take some time, sometimes quite a lot of time, sometimes a few months until get new tenants and move in. That means the landlord losing a lot of money, a lot of rental loss. That's when property manager will help landlords to claim that rental loss from landlord insurance. The other thing, landlord insurance is also cover accidental damage and then a malicious damage by tenant. Even though we get a good tenant, sometimes we cannot avoid the risk of tenants damaging the property accidentally. That's when sometimes they get too scared and then they just run away. Tenants run away, move out without telling us. That's when property manager will help landlords to claim landlord insurance as well, because they will cover that malicious and then accidental damage. Or unexpected thing happen, for example, tenant passed away, that's when landlord insurance will come into place as well. We will help landlord to claim the rental loss and also the cost of cleaning that property until we get a new tenant.
What is the damage if we don't have the landlord insurance? What do you think is the potential maximum damage that we have to fork out as a landlord? Providing if the building is still intact,
Yeah.
but I just have a tenant that is not performing.
I had an example. This is a landlord that came to me after they did themselves. They self-managed, and then they came to me with already tenants in place, and tenants were already behind, I think at that time about 4 months without paying rent. They didn't know what to do, and then the first question I asked, do you have landlord insurance? They're like, yes, we do. I said, like, are you sure? Show it to me. Turns out they only have building insurance, so they didn't have landlord insurance. So we end up taking the case. We said, but again, there's no landlord insurance, so they need to cover themselves the rental loss, which basically 5 months of rental loss, and then tenants moved out with a lot of their belongings because that property was rented furnished. So that's probably cost about 20,000, 30,000, and then they left a lot of rubbish as well. That took the owner, I think at that time about 3,000 to 4,000 to actually get rid of their rubbish. Good landlord insurance and then a good property manager, that's a good combination to really mitigate your risk.
No, there's lots of information there, isn't it? And a lot of people don't know about that, which I think is very important. And that's the whole idea of this podcast, is to try and get that information out there. And landlord insurance is one that's always missed.
Yes.
If there's a one takeaway in the whole conversation today, what would it be for our listeners?
Do a lot of research and speak to professionals before you make an offer, before you decide. And I think property investment is a great way to grow your wealth if you do it right, if you know how to maximize your return and how to minimize your risk.
Well, love that. Thank you again, Ervina. I think that was an amazing podcast again, once again. And thank you for being here with us.
My pleasure. It's always a pleasure to be part of your podcast.
Thank you so much, Ervina. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. In our episode for property investors, we'll bring you back more contents and guests that is going to help you to be better in property investors in Australia.
Hi, my name is Ervina Deng from Harcourts Property Specialist. I'm here to help property investors. If you would like to have a chat, feel free to contact me on 0450 326588.